Hello, I wanted to do a follow-up video to my last one talking about my cube and the changes I've been making. That was sort of a work in progress of seeing kind of where things were shaping up, but I'm really pleased with the end result. As I talked about before, I went and gave several of the draft archetypes an overhaul. Green and white went from being human tribal to a token/life gain theme. White and black pretty much remained the same. It was still about tokens and sacrifice effects, but I added more life gain payoffs, which is shared between the black and white archetype and the green and white archetype. And then the black-green archetype has been changed from being life gain focused to being about just sacrifice and token payoffs. And so while I still do have the black life gain cards, they're more focused on black and white rather than black and green, because between the two of them, green and black just did not have that many payoff effects. You really need white to get the life gain payoffs, or at least that's what I've found. I also removed a lot of cards which were lacking strong synergy between multiple archetypes, and so there's definitely a lot more coverage between the different pairings, the different color pairings. I also swapped out some multicolored cards. The Third Path Iconoclast became Fire and Ice, just a classic iconic piece of removal. And then I mentioned before about updating some of the three-colored cards so they had better synergy, like Leovold for Xavier Sol, Infested Captain. Jared Carthelion, True Heir, became Fleetfoot Dancer. Maelstrom Wander was swapped out for Eshki Dragonclaw, and Queen Marchesa for Zurgo Stormrender. I also changed out a couple of Planeswalkers, Comet Stellar Pup for Nahiri the Harbinger. I kind of like Comet, but the randomness factor made it difficult to play against for some people. It could get a little frustrating with all the dice rolling, so Comet was cut for something a little more reliable with Nahiri. And then Dovin Grand Arbiter. Originally, the blue and white draft archetype was flying, and so since Dovin made a flying token, that was the link there. But when blue and white shifted from being flying themed to a blink theme, I decided to swap out Dovin Grand Arbiter for Venser the Sojourner as a way to add more repeatable blink effects to that. I also edited the artifacts. I took out a lot of the high mana value artifacts and put in more 1 and 2 drops, more things to cantrip, and that should help smooth out people's mana bases when drafting. Gives people more 1 drops beyond what you find in the different colors. I also tweaked land strategies, because before the cube was playing Crucible of Worlds and Ramunap Excavator, and I took both of those out. There are a lot of fetch lands and be a really powerful effect, but I don't know, it didn't really fit any of the themes. There's no landfall theme specifically in the cube. And to that end, I also took out Vizier of the Menagerie and Augur of Autumn. Those both let you play creatures and, in some cases, lands off of the top of your deck. I also took out Oracle of Moldiah and Courser of Kruphix for a similar reason. They let you play lands off the top, but they also reveal the top card of your library, and that's giving your opponents a lot of information, which can hurt you when you're playing. So I just took out the whole playing lands from the top of the deck and just opted for more cards that were more synergistic from the various factions. One thing that I did, since I was really shaking up two green draft archetypes, black, green, and green, white, I added a lot more token producers, because before there had been very few in this deck, and now I was finding that token producers were going to be the backbone of not 1 but 2 draft archetypes. And so I just grabbed in a lot of things like Tendershoot Dryad, Scute Swarm, Thragtusk, just a lot of different awesome token producers in green to help that out. Now, white also has plenty, and then black has plenty of token producers, so they're not going to be leaning heavily on green. I think that white and black are still providing the majority of creature token producers, since that was the original tokens pairing in this cube. But green is there to help shore up green-white as well as green-black, that the white and black sides of those aren't doing all the token production. But one thing that I'm really excited about is that now every draft archetype has at least 4 cards which overlap with each other archetype that shares a color with it. So that means there's no more stacks of just a single card or 2 cards, but everything has at a minimum 4 cards. So it's like discard and sacrifice tokens has like 5 cards in that pile. But everything has at least 4 now, like artifacts and discard. And there's black cards, at least 4 black cards that could go in either an artifact or a discard theme. And that was the one I was struggling with quite a bit before. But so to give you an idea of what I settled on for those, Altar of Baal, which, you know, artifact decks want it, but discard also wants it because you're discarding cards, discarding creatures that you can reanimate. This one just has a lot of overlap with every black faction in the set, because black and white and black and green both care about producing tokens, which is what you want to be sacrificing to the Altar of Baal. So this really could honestly be a card that applies to all 4 factions, but for the sake of categorizing and everything, I'm just sticking to artifacts and discard, because quite frankly that was a faction that needed the help the most. The other pairings have plenty to share and go around. But the other one I put in was Scavenger's Talent, which creates food tokens, but it also can reanimate, which is another sub-theme of the discard ability, and also can mill cards to fill up your graveyard. Scavenger's Talent just works well from that area. But again, this is also something that benefits from these sack effects, so a lot of these ones that do go for the artifact and discard could just as easily go in for the token sacrifice strategies. But again, slim picking, so they just go there. Crypt Caller Cherry, now this one is a very obvious overlap. It is an artifact, so the artifact deck could want it. But then you also get benefits from discarding cards to create 2/2 black zombies. Now this is one that I would say that between the two of them, the discard deck is definitely going to want it more than artifacts, because if you don't have a lot of discard synergies, then just a 5/5 menace for 4, you know, it has to be crewed for 2 as a vehicle. It's nice, but you really want to be discarding on a regular basis, and so it's really going to shine more so in discard than it would in the artifacts. And then the last one I had was from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. It's the Hostile Investigator. So this is one that creates clue tokens whenever one or more players discards a card, and then when it enters the battlefield, you can make target opponent discard a card. So it's some nice card advantage as you're discarding cards or making your opponents discard. So that's an example of shoring up the weaknesses in terms of overlap. Now, one thing that I was looking at is that most of these piles are between 4 and 6 cards in them. There are a few that have quite a bit more, though, and that's basically the white that is shared between green-white and black-white, and then the black that is shared between white-black and green-black, and the green that's shared between green-white and green-black. And so those each have a dozen or so cards in them. Because the way I see it, that I want there to be more synergies between these, because those 3 factions are linked more closely than any of the others. The others are kind of doing their own separate thing, and so it's more acceptable for those for the cards shared between them to not be as strong as these 3, because these 3 are sharing from a tighter card pool. So I was pleased to see that had happened, that there was that level of overlap between those 3 factions, since they're kind of sharing a similar space. Now, another thing that changed with this is that black became more focused. It had some sub-themes which weren't really being supported, like stealing your opponent's cards and playing them with Gonti and Tiny Bones being some example of cards that were cut just to help streamline, to make more room for more synergistic cards, especially more artifact cards. One other thing is that auras, counters, and artifacts are now the 3 archetypes that had the least support, but they're much more acceptable levels in green and white and black and green. Used to be before the update. But when I was looking at it, I was looking and seeing how many cards were there for each color in each archetype. And most all of them had between 20 to 30 cards that were tagged with a specific thing in each color. And a few of the exceptions were blue cards that cared about counters, black cards that cared about artifacts, and red cards that cared about auras. Those 3 were all below 20 cards. And so I was like, well, can we up that? And so I looked and it's like, well, where's some room? Where can I pull from? And I looked and I saw that, oh, well, there were quite a bit of blue cards in the Spellslinger category, more so than they needed, honestly. And so I was able to pull out several of the suboptimal Spellslinger cards and able to replace those with blue cards that cared about counters. And I was able to get that up from 14 blue cards that cared about counters all the way to 20, a much more acceptable level. Same thing with black with the artifacts. There were a lot of black discard cards, and so I was able to pull a few of those out, and that one still was able to stay. It went from like 27 black discard cards down to 24, which is still plenty. And then I was able to bump up the black artifacts from 17 up to 20. And then auras just needed a couple of red cards to get it over the hump, and the black-red discard still had quite a few red cards, so I was able to pull a couple of those, bring it from 24 down to 22, and then swap those out for a couple of cards red cards that the Aura faction would care about, and that bumped it up to 20. And so I made a few more tweaks, but that's really where the cube stands at now, is that it's a pretty even split of support between all of the different factions, and I'm just really happy with how it looks right now. It feels more complete in that all of the draft archetype themes feel very thought out. I don't know if I'm going to do a breakdown of each of the draft archetypes like I did before. They haven't changed too much. If I were to, it would probably be an updated green-black and updated green-white, since they've changed the most. Everything else remains pretty much as it was before, with just a few minor tweaks here and there. But I'm really happy with how the cube is looking right now, and I cannot wait to play it again with my friends. But I hope that this video was informative. I hope that this kind of gives you some ideas about the process that goes into working on and building a cube, and the things that you should consider. But I do plan on having another video here in the near future. I've got some commander decks I want to go over and discuss, talk about the updates from Edge of Eternities and other new tweaks I'm making as a result of that. But I really appreciate you stopping and listening, so thank you very much. Be sure to check out my store on TCG Player if you're looking for cards for your commander decks or your cube or what have you. But I'll catch you next time. Take care. Bye.